Hi, Pebbles. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited you're here. I will give a more formal introduction in just a second, but first of all, how are you and where in the world are you zooming in from today?
I'm great, and I'm zooming in from a small little island in South Carolina.
Very cool. Okay, I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear more about that. And for those who don't know, Pebbles and I just met, but we have a few friends in common. I have been following you and your work of the Horses and Humans Research Foundation for, I want to say, at least a year. So I'm very curious to hear more about it. But first, so people understand who you are and your connection with that. Dr. Pebbles Turbeville is the CEO of the Horses and Humans Research Foundation, where she leads efforts to advance research and education that enhance the well-being of horses and humans and deepen understanding of their interactions. Dr. Turbeville has extensive experience in higher education, serving as a consultant and associate professor. Very, very cool. I have been following what you guys are doing and what you've been up to because I was working on a TEDx talk about horses and I was like, who is this group? What is even going on? Oh my gosh. And then I know you just had your first convention or conference and like tell me more about the Horses and Humans Research. I'm so excited that you exist.
That's great. Well, we've actually been around, believe it or not, 20 years.
Whoa.
Last year was our 20th anniversary, and I came on the scene in 2020 during the pandemic. I was working on my dissertation and kind of took how everybody was reevaluating their lives, like, is this something you want to do, or where are we now in the world, pandemic wise, craziness? So I started part time as an interim, and then it kind of has snowballed into the fact that now I'm the CEO and have been here for 6 years. But we've done some incredible growth in the past 6 years. We actually had our sixth conference this past
Okay.
February. It was our sixth, but it was, one of the biggest ones. We keep continuing to grow, which is great. And the first time we had a conference, it was like, who's going to come to hear about research? So, really, kind of stepping back a second, we were started by our founder, Molly Sweeney, who was volunteering at a therapeutic riding barn or equine assisted services. And she was a long life horsewoman herself, loved horses, but she was seeing kids just being transformed by horses. And she was like, how is this working? So she started this us research foundation. And so we started giving grants to see how horses were actually helping humans. So we have done, um, um, I mean, over $1 million worth of grant funds have been given out. And our first one was on cerebral palsy. We've done several on children with autism or maybe trauma, veterans that have post-traumatic. So, we've kind of looking at the spectrum of different areas about how horses help humans. But when I came on, I was like, this is great giving a grant once a year, but we really need to educate people too and show them that research can be fun, research can be exciting, it can also be interesting. So that's where I came in as far as helping out with that. Getting people excited about research and kind of asking questions like, really, how does this work? But we've also switched it a little bit because we were always looking at how the horses help these humans. But now with social licensing, we're looking at, okay, humans need to do a better job at taking care of horses. So how can we help them? So that's part of our just too, is to kind of look out for our related partners in this.
Okay, okay. I have so many questions. And first of all, I'm really sorry. I was clearly living under a rock. You guys have been around for 20 years. Forgive me. Let's just correct that one. And
No
I
worries, because
am.
I mean, it's a struggle because we're still like trying to get the word out of who we are and what we do. And
Yeah.
when, you know,
Yeah. I think you explained it so beautifully, though, and it sounds like there's a bit of a pivot right now, which I think is super important. And the term you used was social licensing. Can you
mm,
unpack that a little bit for our listeners?
sure. So social licensing to operate or to thrive, depends on how you look at it, is really about how the public perceives you and what you are doing. So, because of the fact that we all have cell phones and everybody's videotaping and getting all this about horses, and they don't necessarily are asking questions.
Mm,
Um, but there are some things, for example, that happen like in the Olympics, the pentathlon, where the fact that they were borrowing horses and people weren't prepared to ride, and it became kind of ugly, and so we don't have that event anymore. Same thing, there were some things going on too with dressage. There's some things, and every discipline has had some uh, I want to say some ugly things happen. And sometimes it's taken out of context. Sometimes it's really reporting on things that we need to do better. So,
mhm.
really, social licensing is the public's perception about how we are treating horses. So, those questions, it needs, part of it is an education piece, like we need to let people understand. But then part of it is we're so used to doing things in certain ways that we need to be questioned what is best. So
Mm, mm.
that's, it kind of goes both ways.
So interesting, especially interesting because I've been interviewing all these guests preparing for the Spiritual Horse Seeker Summit and like really connecting people to horses, to their love and passion of horses on a spiritual level, right? And what's this about and do no harm, and then at what point is it harm and kind of getting into that, should they never be ridden at all, right? Like, well, let's actually look at what's going on with wild Mustangs when horses are not quote taken care of it all and some of the ways that there's like a whole deep dive as you and I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
there's a whole chapter right
yeah.
of all the sides there, right? So it's really interesting, and I'm looking at this book over here. I'm going to grab it real quick. um I'm not sure if you've seen this one, but it's Horses in the
In the
City, or The
city.
Horse in the City, Living Machines in the 19th Century. And I actually think one of these guys might be from your area, Clay McShane and Joel A. Tarr. What's
Mhm.
fascinating about this book is like the perception of how we're treating horses. And again, what was coined by an anonymous reader in that book is this idea of the living machine. And at the turn
Mhm.
of the century, we really were putting more on horses than what horses could handle. I would argue that today we might be doing that to ourselves, humans, right? Like we are expecting ourselves to do more than we can actually handle. I mean, even the 9 to 5 work week was based on the amount of time a Clydesdale could work before it would drop dead or no longer be sound. So like the workhorse mentality and sort of where that crossover is. And I'm really curious with what you're seeing in the research and how it's being received by the public, because so much of what I see with horse people specifically is that we kind of just start talking among ourselves and we're speaking our own language, right? And we're kind of talking about these different things. But folks who don't know, quote, anything about horses, and that's more and more true today. I mean, 30% of people identify as horse lovers, but only
Yes.
1% has been an actual horse owner. And that's a huge distinction. And of those owners, how many are actually caring for the horse and like they're learning how to pick up hooves and do all these things? So like I'd love to hear kind of your perception of more or less how it's going.
Well, I think it depends on who you're asking, what population, what their background is, what, and are they in a discipline where they might, or an organization where they might be getting some education about this, or do they just have a backyard horse, which is fine, and maybe they don't have the information that we're trying to share with everybody, or maybe you might have some people who have backyard horses who might be more educated than somebody else. So I think it just depends on the individual and what they're seeking. Like,
Mhm.
are they looking or asking questions? One of my favorite quotes from Dr. Peters is, let's remain question driven. And so how can we be better people, for ourselves, but also for the environment, for people, for horses, for dogs. Um, it goes around. But part of our HHRF's mission is to really educate people, and it's not necessarily horse welfare. Horse welfare to me is like basic needs.
Mhm.
We want to go with well-being, because we want our horses to be as happier and healthier than just the average, taking care of the necessities. Excuse me, I'm getting a little tongue tied there. So we kind of look at the research, and one of the biggest ones that came out in 2020 was the 5 domains model. And really, that's number one is nutrition, making sure that horses that are in an environment have nutrition, and they're grazers. They're meant to graze. They're not meant to be in a stall and have a lot of heavy grain given to them twice or 3 times a day. And that kind of goes to domain 2, which is physical environment. They're made to run and be free and open, explore, walk different tracks. 3 is looking out for their health, in all aspects, because just like people, we have diseases, they have diseases, and making sure that they're inoculated and protected from those. 4 is kind of their natural behavior. You know, Horses are herd animals. They like to hang out with each other and be with a bunch of other horses. They don't like to be isolated. And then really the hopeful piece is that 5th domain is that mental state. So if all those 4 domains kind of come together, the 5th one will come together as far as like their mental aspect. Are they healthy? Are they feeling like they're a horse and being happy as a horse?
Or healthy as a horse too.
And
It's
healthy
like
as
the
a horse.
common one, right? Yeah, it's reminding me of Maslow's hierarchy, which I'm sure you're
Yes,
familiar with, right? Okay, so the 5 domains. I've never heard that before. And recently I heard that they discovered a 6th level of Maslow's hierarchy. Have you heard this?
I have not.
It's kind of cool. So
Oh,
it's awe or
oh,
like wonder, like transcendence. And so I'm thinking
oh,
about with my
nice.
horses when they kind of get to that moment. I don't know if you've ever been on a trail ride or done anything where your horses collectively are all like, oh,
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
just thinking like that's kind of and stepping into sort of that spiritual plane, like what would that look like? But
Yeah.
I love the 5 and just what you
Yeah.
guys are doing. And I'm so curious a little bit more about what you were up to in your research when you came into the organization and just a little more of your background and history. Like, have horses always been a thing for you? How did you come into it?
I've been kind of in and out of horses most of my life. But before I started with Horses and Humans Research Foundation, I was a professor at a small little liberal arts college that actually has closed. It closed. It closed after I left. Let me just replace that. That had a big equestrian program. So there, I actually was in sports management, and I taught sports classes, equine studies classes, but my specialty was really therapeutic horsemanship, which is kind of a little bit of aspect, or if you, the big umbrella word is equine assisted services.
Yep.
And that's where you're actually utilizing the movement or the of the horse for therapy, or it could be just for therapeutic value. You have to be a licensed therapist to actually do therapy with a horse. A physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech language pathologist, or a licensed counselor.
Yeah.
That's the therapy side. And I was on the therapeutic riding side. So I
Mhm.
was teaching college students how to teach riding to people who had disabilities, whether it be cognitive or physical or emotional. So that's it's so this really where I am now is kind of interesting, because I have college students who've graduated who are in the field now practicing, and either in some form or fashion of equine assisted services. So now I'm in this position that actually supports them with research. So equine assisted centers can actually go to our website and find the research that we funded, but we also have a collection of research through Science Open for open access. So anything that has to deal with how horses and human interact or horse well-being, this algorithm updates this collection every night. So there's a way of getting or finding research that's kind of like your own little bucket of information right there, so that people want to find out more. They can go to our website, look under the research tab, and go to Science Open and see our collection.
Wow, that is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's so, so cool.
Yeah,
Something I've been thinking about, it's kind of been on my heart, is this idea of like a horse story project, which is just we're losing these stories, of
yeah,
how are people connecting with horses. And it's also really interesting. You were talking about this earlier, how people see them in the Olympics and the sports, and they see, running and then the drugging and issues and, abuse and all these things. And unfortunately, that's the stuff that makes headlines and makes news, but also changes policy. And sometimes things need to be called out, right?
right, yeah.
But those aren't the only stories, Like there are
No,
so many
no,
more.
no.
Um, did you have personally like a heart horse or a story, someone who really, a horse that really impacted the trajectory of your life?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I've had a lot of different ones throughout my throughout my life. My favorite probably was Dan, Daen. He was a Frisian stallion imported from Holland. He just was breathtaking, but a gentle giant. And I actually had several of his offspring
Mm.
because I was so infatuated with him. Um, so, and Dutch is one that I, still is hanging out as a pasture, hanging out in the pasture with some other geldings right now, because he's not with me, but he's in the middle part of South Carolina and enjoying life. But I've had so many that have taught me lessons that I mean, that would be a whole nother podcast.
We'll do a comeback. We'll do a comeback. Yeah, it's so interesting, and I think horses can really touch us and dogs, and I know you also have maybe a thing about sea turtles. Will you tell us about
Yeah, I'm a volunteer because I am on a barrier island. I'm a volunteer for the sea turtle organization here that's under the leadership who has a permit for under South Carolina Department of Wildlife. But yeah, I help out with the loggerhead turtles here. So we go out every morning starting May 1st through October, looking to make sure that if they did come up, if a loggerhead turtle came up during the night and she put her nest, that it's in a safe place.
that?
And if it isn't, then we have permission to relocate it in a certain amount of time because of other things. But yeah, and then we also look for them to emerge 60 days later and make sure that they get into the ocean where they go off on their own little journey.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
that's so cool.
I could tell
Love
that's
that.
another podcast too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah.
I could talk about sea turtles.
We can do another comeback for that. So back to horses and humans and some of the research. I'm just curious, what are some of your favorite things that have come out of your time or even prior to your time in terms of the research you've discovered? Like, what are some of sort of your highlight reel things that you feel like I want to be sure people know about these things?
Well, I think one is that we have 18 studies that HHRF has funded ourselves. And part of it is that first study was on cerebral palsy. That was pretty amazing because it showed how horses really affect kids with cerebral palsy and their trunk control. So that was like groundbreaking. That was 20 years ago. I think the other pieces that we did, I don't want to say the first, but we were very instrumental in getting veterans studies done about those who have post-traumatic syndrome. So making sure that and seeing how horses can really affect those veterans. So, and we've done 3 of them, or excuse me, we funded. We don't actually do the research, we just fund the research. And all that research is on our website. So you can go and see it. And the cool part is, I call it the ripple effect because our the research that we've funded has been cited 2,000 times.
Wow.
So the way it works is like if you're going to do a research study and you want to do it on veterans, you look up to see what has been done. So you end up citing our work so that you can continue on the work. So that's why it's the ripple effect, because what we're doing is helping others.
Mm.
So in more ways than one.
So cool. I love
Yeah.
that so much. And let's just pretend that there's a listener out there who's like, I've never heard about, how a horse could help with trunk control or how a horse could help with PTSD. What have you found?
Well, if you, like I said, if going back to the therapist side, if you're a PT or an OT or a SPL, that the movement of the horse is it it walks in 3 dimensions like we do. It
Mhm.
all has a front to back movement, as a rotational movement, and it has a lateral movement. So therapists will utilize that movement for treatment of their client.
Mm.
So things that you might do in a lab might be static, like if you're working on balance. But for example, I went and saw a veteran ride who was a double amputee,
Mm.
and he had ridden before his legs were removed. But he said when I got on the horse and the horse started moving, he said I almost flipped over backwards because
Mm.
I forgot that I needed to engage my core
Mhm.
because of that movement of how strong it can be. So because he was there and he rode horses, he did much better in his rehab than other participants that were in his, I guess, I don't want to say class, but in his rehab group, because he was doing this,
Yeah.
movement that others weren't getting because of the horse. Um, the same thing kind of goes with, I don't want to fixate on veterans, but um, most a lot of people just aren't into counseling. They feel uncomfortable in a closed room
Mhm.
talking, and
Mhm.
but some people feel very comfortable. But
Sure.
then there's some that just wouldn't have a hard time expressing themselves or talking about themselves. But if you take them to a barn and they're outside and they're like grooming horses and just talking about horses or being around horses, it's like there's something magical that will happen, that they just tend to open up to that
Mhm.
counselor who's there with them. And some of the counselors will, have, I mean, I'm not a counselor and I don't play one on TV, so I can't say exactly what they're doing, but they might have exercises or things for them to do to kind of walk down the path that they need to go down to explore. So, and the horse is just, he's cool or she's cool. They're there as a sentinel, and being kind of just hanging out in the moment. They don't think about everything that we think about as humans, about everything we got to do. They're just like, hey, you just need to take a breath and be here for a minute. So,
Mm.
yeah.
You're reminding me of one of my favorite books, which I think is out of print now, but it's called Guardians of Being. I don't know if you ever saw that,
Uh,
but it was Eckhart Tolle who's like, very much in the, I think New Earth was his book, but it's like it's about being present, it's about being in the now, right? And he partnered with I think that he did mutts, but he's a cartoonist, right, for animals.
mm,
And it was a fundraiser, I believe, for shelter, a big one that you would know that's like national. But anyways, Guardians of Being was about how cats and dogs really just pull us into the now, into the now, into the moment,
Yeah.
into the moment, into the moment. And I think so much of the work with horses and to think back on our ancestors and how we used to get around, like we had to be so present. I mean,
Mhm.
if you ever worked with a horse and you put your phone up, right? Like it's a complete disconnect. And they're like, "Where are you?" Like, "I'm right here." And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's really interesting how they can ground us so well. And one of the things I've been really curious about is, I love the movement research, but what about just the presence? Like, even without words, without a therapist, like, what research just being around a horse, just being in their magnetic field? What are you seeing with that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good question. And, that's something we haven't funded ourselves. But there is, some research out there about that as well. And I think that's really important, especially given this day and age with technology, um, and how, like, I don't, all of a sudden I've gone blank, but there's a book that basically talks about how children's brains are being rewired because of technology
Is it
and their
anxious
development.
generation? Yeah.
Huh?
Anxious generation.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, I have
Exactly.
it in here
Yeah, yeah.
somewhere. Yep, that's the one.
Great book. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, to me, the barn was a safe haven. Like, I loved as a kid, like, just, I didn't even have all the technology and static, that noise that we have today, but just going to the barn and just hanging out with your friends and the horses, I know it impacted my life. And that's why I know horses are awesome. If you want to put it in just cool terms. I mean, and the fact that that was my saving grace was
Yeah,
going to the barn and hanging out.
yeah.
Um, and the friends I made that I still have today, because of those connections that we had. And I think, you know, unfortunately, we have this huge push in developing farmland into apartments and houses. And I'm really scared for the future about, are we going to have places for our horses? And that community is important for all aspects. And
Mm.
we really need to protect, those barns and those communities because of, just the importance of how horses are helping us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I guess my question would be if you could cast a dream for the future and the impact, and it could be from Horses and Humans Research Foundation, it could be from someone else listening to this and something else they're doing, could be all of us collectively. What would your vision be 100 years from now? What would we see, perhaps as a result of the thought, the intention, the vision, the understanding of the importance of this work and this connection?
I think it, as much as I'm an advocate for horses and I love horses, I think it's bigger than that. I think it's looking at the whole nature aspect and the whole one of being one with the environment and the world. And we need to take a better, um, we need to be better stewards, for everybody, not just for humans, but for all animals. But I think that that's our saving grace because, with technology, you think it's like emails. You think that would be easier, making our life better. But I swear, just trying to get through my inbox is a nightmare, just because it keeps coming. And
Right?
it's like an avalanche. And, you know, with this whole pressure of keeping up with the Joneses and trying to do more and do more. And you think technology is helping you, but is it? Like,
Mm,
I feel like sometimes I ride on a spinning wheel,
mhm.
that we just really need to take a break and like enjoy the earth and humans. And we're herd animals too, being around other people, being around horses, being outside. I i think that combination needs to be really protected.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Yeah,
Can I go down a rabbit hole?
no, not at all. You're preaching to the choir. I mean, I live right outside of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Like nature
Uh,
conservation, big thing around here. You know what I mean? And
that's great.
being forward thinking about like what happens if we don't make
Hmm.
sure to protect it, and then what happens when we do, right? And
Hmm.
it's that paradox, right? Like the further we go, I mean, they say 1 degree turn, and in 100 years, we're going to be in a totally different spot, right? So this is
Yeah.
where, like, if we make sure to stay grounded with the things that, regardless of all this technology and all these shiny things that we think are so exciting, and don't get me wrong, I'm super grateful. I can connect with you in North Carolina,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Idaho. Like, this is so great. I can even get
Yeah.
to see you, right? And
Yeah.
I can see your logo and like all of these cool things. But it's not the same as being in real space together, taking in
Yes.
the same sense, the same sounds, the same magnetic field
Yeah.
that is real space, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that was the amazing piece of our conference because bringing people together and the venue that we had, it was a conference center that was just for us. It wasn't like in a huge hotel where there was multiple conferences going on. So we were all together and just the energy, positive energy that was going on in just learning and connecting to people, learning more about how to do better, better, do better, is just amazing, because I feel like we we can't pretend to feel like we're going to solve this by ourselves. We've
Mm,
got to work together.
mm, mm. Yeah, so true. And I know a couple of those guests are going to be on the Spiritual Horse Seekers Summit, and they said the same thing. They were like, the energy in the room and talking to each other. And I was like, what? This is so cool.
Yeah.
So thank you for
Yeah.
bringing us all together. And I know our listeners are going to want to follow along. We will put all the links in the show notes. But for anybody who is out there taking a walk with their dog, how can they find you?
It's real easy. It's horses with an S and 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 humans with an S.org. And that takes you to our website and you can find everything you need to know. Like I said, about future conferences, we're going to Prague in September
Cool.
to do an international symposium there. And then next year we'll be in Florida again in 2027. But we also do free webinars, and all the webinars are recorded and put on our YouTube channel, so you can go and watch those as well. But I think that there's so much more research that we can do. Um, and I'd like to do a big call for different things, but I think there's also people who are affected, like who going through cancer remission and know how horses have infected their life and helped them through that whole journey. There are people with MS who have told me how horses have helped them through that journey. So there's just so many different aspects of how horses help us. And just having that research out there that can help people and be cited and know that this is not just something willy nilly. This is not just a pony ride. It really is being around horses and being in an environment or helping humans.
So good. Thank you so much. I feel like what we're saying is this is just the tip of the iceberg. So like
Yes.
cheers, y'all. There's
Yes.
so much more to come. And thank you on behalf of all of our fans and listeners for everything you've done, Pebbles. Like it's
Uh,
amazing. Hats off to you, seriously. Um, and you guys follow along, like get involved in this research, get involved in this conversation. It's ongoing,
yes.
right? And
Yeah,
it's
we're looking for volunteers. So if you want to roll up your sleeves and help us, because we really, that's how we're making things happen or with our volunteers. So yeah.
awesome. And more important now than ever, I would say.
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much, listeners. And until we meet again, adventure on. If you loved this, share it with a friend, subscribe, And we'll see you next time. Thank you so much, Pebbles.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it, Kat. Thanks.
This is awesome.
Hmm.